Welcome to Elevated Practice, where we interview masters and mavericks within the field of holistic medicine and uncover unconventional stories in the field of health and wellness. I'm your host, Gretchen Badami, and every episode I'll be interviewing clinicians, scholars, entrepreneurs, and educators who share their wisdom and ideas with you. Are you ready to elevate your practice? Let's begin today's episode. I'd like to extend a big thank you to Handcraft Health for sponsoring Elevated Practice and empowering integrative healthcare practitioners to create personalized healthcare packages for their patients. Create a free account today and elevate your practice at www.handcraft.health. And now, on to today's episode. Hello. Today, we are joined by Jean Giblette. Jean has been growing East Asian medicinal plants in the mid-Hudson Valley of New York for over 30 years. Originally graduating with a bachelor's in psychology from Harvard Radcliffe, Jean worked in research and systems analysis for 2 decades before discovering her passion for Chinese medicinal botanicals. And since then, she has spent the past 30 years growing, educating, and presenting about Asian medicinal herb cultivation. Affiliated since 2000 with the U.S. Council of Colleges of Acupuncture and Herbal Medicine, she developed extracurricular study opportunities in medicinal plant botany, horticulture, and conservation. In 2008, she founded the nonprofit High Falls Foundation to continue this work and to develop production of Chinese medicinal plants on small ecological farms throughout the U.S. and Canada. Currently, she coordinates the Zaicheng Herbs program to direct market the herbs to licensed practitioners via e-commerce. She's co-authored Mending the Web of Life, Chinese Medicine and Species Conservation, published numerous articles, and given scores of presentations on medicinal botany and conservation over the past 3 decades. So last month, I attended a roundtable discussion, including a dozen or more domestic herbal garden cultivators and botanical experts discussing current issues and brainstorming ideas relating to domestic herb production and potential expansion. Conversation was particularly timely and relevant, given the current geopolitical climate and its impact on the import and pricing of herbs from China and Asia in general. Now, these concerns that are being raised now by practitioners regarding cost and availability of herbal medicinals are concerns that Jean has been discussing for decades. And it's time now to bring our community at large into the conversation. So, Jean, my goal for today is to have you provide an overview of the history of domestic herbal production in the U.S., such as what efforts have been taken since the 90s to cultivate herbs, highlighting the experts who've been tending these farms and their regenerative farming practices, the network that you've created to educate and research and provide for practitioners, and also the advantages and the barriers to domestic herbal production. So welcome, Jean.
Thank you. Thank you, Gretchen.
To everyone who's listening, I hope to generate awareness and spark interest in our community at large to join in this conversation, and to provide this introduction to anyone who is a botanist, an herbalist, a farmer, an entrepreneur, a manufacturer, a researcher, or an educator to get involved. So with that lengthy introduction, Jean, I now pass the mic to you to tell us your story and give us this history.
Thank you so much, Gretchen. I'm really pleased to be here. My personal story is that I discovered Chinese herbal medicine in 1993. The way things happen among human beings, it's never just one person who gets an idea. It crops up in different places throughout the continent or the world. It's like magic. I went into a Chinese herbal shop in New York, Chinatown. I was led to study with Jeffrey Yuen in New York. I told him I didn't want to be a clinician. I already knew that. I wanted to grow the plants. And could I study with him? And he said, sure. I got in contact with Robert Newman. Robert Newman is basically the Johnny Appleseed of Chinese medicinal herbs in North America.
I know Robert from Emperors out in California.
He's retired now, but in the 90s. He was a student at ACTCM, and that college had the bright idea of starting a garden. And they got a Chinese scientist to come over bearing a load of plants. And then somehow the school got into some kind of financial trouble, and the plants and the scientist ended up going across the bay to UC Berkeley Botanical Garden, where Elaine Sedlak helped him plant a garden there at UC Berkeley. And Robert was really frustrated with this situation because he had to travel all the way across the bay to see the plants. He couldn't stand that. So he started collecting seeds through botanical garden networks. This was in about 1990. In 94, after I determined that I wanted to grow the plants, I got in touch with Elaine Sedlak, who led me to Robert. Now, what happened was that about 8 other people across the country, they were all plant people like me, and Robert had a deep attachment to the plants. They all gravitated toward Robert. And in 1996, was after he had tried to maintain the plants in pots at ACTCM, lining the hallways were pots. He dispersed his collection to all of these people. And I call them now the Newman Conservators. So it was Vinnie McKinney in Missouri, Joe Hollis in North Carolina, Peg Schaefer in California, Rich Ochek, who had Horizon Herbs in Oregon. Now his children are running it as strictly medicinals. So that's a plant and seed nursery. Conrad Richter in Toronto. There were other people involved who didn't stay the course. And then unfortunately, we have Cindy Revere in Ohio and Joe Hollis, who are dead now. Most of this movement is coming from baby boomers. It was a very, very powerful experience back April 22nd, 1970, the first Earth Day. And the people who lived through that period remember that it was an intensely emotional time with a great deal of social expression in books, films, music. There was a kind of back to the land movement. People who had no experience in farming, they went out and obtained farms. A classic is Jack Lazor of Butterworks Yogurt in Vermont. He died in 2020. This guy grew up in Massachusetts. He was the son of a Monsanto chemist. Went back to the land with his wife Anne, and they founded Butterworks Yogurt, which is just a fabulous thing. This type of thing was happening all across the country, and it was all very local, and it was all underground grassroots. So it never really made the news, not through the 70s or 80s. It wasn't until the 1990s. The National Organic Program was passed by Congress in 1990, but then there was a huge scandal in 98 where the old guard tried to undermine the organic movement. So this was a hard-fought war to get organics established. It was a 30-year project from 1970 to 2000. The NOP, National Organic Program, was enacted in 2001. So at the same time, and I believe that these are distinctly parallel social movements, there was organic agriculture, but there was Chinese medicine. 1970, you have a clear beginning there. You have the journalist who was in the advance team for Nixon going to China in 71, got acupuncture for surgery and reported it in the New York Times. Sensational, big splash. Chinese medicine got on the map. Then you had the first colleges in Massachusetts and Maryland. Those were in the early 70s. At this time, you have the baby boomers, Dan Bensky, John O'Connor, Andy Ellis, going to Taiwan and Macau and studying and bringing the real thing back home, so that the English translation of the Materia Medica was first published in 1986. And you had just a few states licensing acupuncture, and it took 30 years or more from 1970 until into the 21st century for the majority of states, 47 states now, plus the District of Columbia, to have practice laws. And 2/3 of them have some provision for herbal medicine, but that still hasn't been worked out completely. So you have this really long trajectory in preparation for growing Chinese herbs in North America.
Yes.
We had the Newman conservators, including myself. We would establish gardens, we would grow the herbs, we would study and establish a direction for ourselves. I was studying with Jeffrey Yuen, but I had no idea where I was going with this. I was just reacting out of curiosity. Then in 2000, Robert and I got a grant, $20,000 grant, to collaborate with the Council of Colleges to start a botanical studies program. So in the aughts, we have a lot of action happening. The colleges were very welcoming for botanical studies, which included ecology and conservation. We expanded the program in 2006 with a Kellogg Foundation grant that was over $200,000. So we were able to roll out to half of the 50 colleges at the time. And those 25 colleges did various interesting programs. They either started a garden or did something unique. And as an example, Vivian Zhang at New England School of Acupuncture and I approached Arnold Arboretum at Harvard. In the late 90s, they put up a database online, and I discovered a whole bunch of medicinal plants. And I called them up and said, could I talk to someone about your medicinal plants? And they said, oh, we don't have any medicinal plants.
Little did they know.
So Vivian and I went in there and said, look, you've got some amazing specimens here. This is huge. In fact, they have a matched pair of eucommia trees. So
Wow.
eucommia is dioecious, that male and female trees are separate. And they have a mated pair that are over 100 years old.
Wow.
And I went to Beijing in 2015 and I visited the Institute of Medicinal Plant Development. They had a garden there, and their eucommia trees are not as old as the Arnold Arboretum's trees.
Wow.
But when the Arboretum management found out that it was the bark that's used as the medicinal, they said, oh, you can't put that on the map. We're afraid of bark strippers.
For those people who are listening, if you don't remember the Latin, it's dugong, which is Comia cortex, the bark of the dugong. Yeah.
Thank you. A very valuable medicinal.
Yes, very valuable.
The Arboretum had already realized that Chinese Americans in Boston Chinatown would come in and pick up the ginkgo fruit and take the ginkgo fruit. So anyway, they cooperated with us and we produced a map of their collection, a really spectacular collection. But fortunately, we have other botanic gardens who are now picking up the ball on Asian medicinal plants. I recently spoke with someone at Duke in North Carolina. Peg Schaefer in California, who's now retired, had grown out some of Robert's most rare species. And the two of them sold those plants to the Huntington in Los Angeles, who started a medicinal garden. I think they had the opening ceremony last year, 2024.
Yes.
So for our practitioners out there and those interested, we have more opportunities to really meet and greet the plants, fortunately. And this can be developed further in the future. So anyway, here we are back in the 2000s, and there's a lot happening. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service got concerned about ginseng and black bear poaching. Now, ginseng, is on the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, CITES, it's called. So they funded a project. The American Herbal Products Association and several international conservation NGOs got involved. And we had a conservation conference in 2002 in New York City. And a book was published in 2006. And this is the Mending the Web of Life. Now, there was a recent revival of this conservation angle. There was a a conference in October of 2022 with Lishan Huang, two other college presidents, organized a really wonderful conference. And I think that they are picking up that conservation ball again and running with it. And by the way, if you want a copy of this, we can sell you one for $20. Just email me, get in contact with me. Conservation is a really important topic, and it has to do with preserving genetic diversity in the plant species, which has to do with their adaptability. So we can have that conversation at some future point, but conservation is a really important part of the work we do. On the grower side, there were several people trying to grow Chinese herbs, thanks to Robert and the conservators. And there was a big herbal products boom and bust in the late 90s. And some of the farmers got screwed. I personally know a farmer that was left with a whole field of valerian that had to be plowed under because the product makers came to the farmers and made all these promises and said, we'll sell anything you can grow. And then production went offshore to low wage platforms within a couple of years, and there were some really angry farmers. So we organized the Medicinal Herb Consortium, as it came to be called, right about the turn of the century. And there were 5 grower groups in different states involved in that. So we were trying to figure out, how do we grow herbs and be able to sell them and make a business out of it? And we hit on the idea of selling Chinese herbs direct to licensed practitioners. So we got a grant from the USDA, $150,000, which we matched. So it was a $300,000 project to do a feasibility study. This was a really interesting project because we did surveys, focus groups, interviews. We presented our samples, and people just flipped over the samples. The quality was so stunningly advantageous, and you could just see the price resistance dissolving. Yeah. So the conclusion of this feasibility study is really what Zaicheng Herbs is attempting to carry out right now. And we'll get into that when we get up to the present time. But that feasibility study was really important. For those who don't know, every state has an agricultural university. It's under the land grant program, which was founded after the Civil War. These universities have a load of resources that's been developed over 150 years. And there are varying degrees of, let's say, devotion to the idea of preserving small farm, independent farm access to crop development. And since agribusiness has dominated since the Second World War, we have a bifurcated system in the US where at one level it's all biotech and GMOs and pharmaceuticals, and at the other level it's the ecological level. And the same bifurcation exists in China. I've witnessed it on my trips there, and this is another rich subject for discussion that really the principle involved affects the future of domestic production. So my mentor, Dr. Craker, who unfortunately passed on a couple of years ago, he enabled us to set up the first trials program. So you have a replicated plot of herbs in different locations, and you control the spacing of the plants, the way they're laid out. But all the independent variables are the characteristics of the site, the soil, the climate, the rainfall, the altitude, etc. So we had these replicated plots in Maine, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and New York. And that was a 3-year project that's now documented online at the federal level. And we had hoped that that was the beginning. So about 2009, we've gotten these grants. Things are going well. And Lyle, Dr. Craker, we organized 6 or 8 scientists at different land grant colleges to do a joint proposal to the USDA for specialty crop development for Chinese herbs. And we applied 4 times and were turned down. And at that point, the Obama administration had a Monsanto guy as the head of USDA. So they said, there's no market for this. You prove to us that there's a market and we'll think about it. Okay. So that same language was used in all of our rejections, and I really got suspicious. And anyway, that's the way it is. And nobody in the US has gotten a federal grant since then. We're in a different kind of world. Now we're up to the teens, and we're chugging along with the support of state grants. So there were universities active in this: North Carolina State University with Janine Davis, and New Mexico State University with Kevin Lombard and others. I was chugging along here in New York, but getting more help from Massachusetts than from Cornell. Cornell was kind of really biotech oriented until very recently, a few years ago. Now they've softened up, and that great granite edifice there in Ithaca is more open to the concept of Chinese herbs. So there was activity going on at the state levels. There were struggles to form organizations of farmers and support them through the development process. And this was all private. For a farmer to get involved in growing Chinese herbs, you have to be able to grow out a small amount and learn the plant, to learn the growth cycle of the plant. And of course, many of our plants are perennials or trees. So it takes 3, 5, 10, 15, 20 years until the plant is mature. So that's a really long range development process. And either a farm is self-sufficient in other ways to sustain that development, or they affiliate with an organization who can keep them going over the period of the development cycle. So we had a lot of difficulty with that. I got our first state grants here in New York in 2003, and our first farms started growing back then. Then we got more grants from the New York Farm Viability Institute, which is a nonprofit that gets its money from the New York legislature. So in 2015 and 16, we were able to add farms, recruit more farms. And we've been through a lot of farms. Not everybody sticks with us. Farming is hard. People get injured, people die, things change. But the success stories are those that either have a really viable financial business plan going. There are retired people who are very helpful. There are couples where one person works off farm and supports the other one while they're farming. So there are ways to get around this. And at present, here in New York, we've learned from a lot of failures throughout the process, but we're still debt-free and dependent on volunteer labor and the genius of these wonderful farmers. So the story of 2010 until now has been one that's involved a lot more struggle. And I personally have been involved with over 8 different groups who have tried to form organizations to support farmers. I'll tell you, this has happened in a lot of states: California, Illinois, Minnesota, North Carolina, New Mexico, New York, Virginia, Washington State, and West Virginia.
Wow. Let's pause for a moment to extend a big thank you to our sponsor, Handcraft Health. I prescribe a lot of herbal medicine in my practice, and quite frankly, I don't want to spend the overhead keeping hundreds of herbs and supplements on hand. Since the pandemic, I do a lot of telehealth consults and ship patients their prescriptions. Handcraft Health has been my lifesaver. It allows me to have a successful and streamlined practice and saves me money and office space. I am not tech savvy, but the platform is really straightforward for me to write and easy for my patients to pay online and receive their orders at home. It's free for practitioners to open a Handcraft Health account. It's just handcraft.health and only takes a few minutes to sign up. It's one of the easiest choices you'll make to do what you do best. And now, back to our episode.
It's been difficult, and the most spectacular failure was in 2018 of the Blue Ridge Center, which beginning in 2013 had raised over $1 million for their grower program. And I was acting as their consultant. I didn't see it coming, but what happens is if you've got a small nonprofit sustaining a group, the federal and state funders are still not conscious of perennial polyculture. They're still oriented to traditional farm production, which is annual crops and animals. So they're like venture capitalists and most billionaires. They want quick results. So you get a grant and you have to hire people, or you get a grant and you have to build a facility, and you do this before you have crop production. That doesn't work. So this has happened in a couple of cases. This happens to a lot of nonprofits, that they become overextended and they're not able to resist the blandishments of funders who say, okay, I want to see 2 full-time people employed at your organization by next year. Or here's $10,000. We want you to build a hoop house. Well, if I'm a nonprofit and I take that money and I build a hoop house, I have to hire people to run it. I have to repair it. I have to somehow get the value of production out of it. And you can't just do that on the spur of the moment. Our financialized economy is not really set up to sustain long-term development in agriculture. And this is a problem that we have to address. The Chinese have done it successfully because they have the anti-poverty program, which has been so successful, and they have the Bank of China. Their main bank is a direct issue currency. So they can, in effect, give grants to organizations that do not have to be matched or repaid. We don't really have that anymore in the United States, and we've got to get it back. So what I'm appealing you all for is we have to be more conscious of how we can fit into the present economy and develop our programs. The advantages of which are, if they're not self-evident to you, I will outline them. You have a far superior quality in fresh production. And this is not like growing exotic species. The natural species, native species of the US and those of Eastern Asia are very closely related. So there's not a big stretch horticulturally. Okay. You've got the issues of shipping costs that went up astronomically at the beginning of COVID. Now you have tariffs. Now you have currency fluctuations. So the idea of importing our materia medica from halfway around the globe is not a very smart idea, and especially when we could do really well here at home. We're also concerned that many of the graduate schools have stopped teaching raw herbs. So we had our botanical studies program now 20 years ago, and we need to somehow get back to that and really encourage practitioners to get their hands in the soil. First, you can educate yourselves with what's going on at the grassroots. The corporate media is not very good at reporting what's going on at the grassroots. They can't report all of those wonderful people out there who are doing marvelous, miraculous things. Because if they reported that, then people would get ideas, and that would be dangerous. I'm recommending that you seek out books and films on the latest in agriculture. Ecological agriculture is very, very insufficiently reported, even today. And just as one example, I'm going to give you Gabe Brown. Gabe Brown, that Gabe is in Gabriel. So Dirt to Soil is a really inspiring book. This guy, another baby boomer, took his parents' farm in North Dakota, and from the 90s to the present, he completely restored the soil. So this is now akin to an old prairie soil that can absorb a 9-inch rainfall immediately, while the farm across the road is flooded. So this is a key to climate change, what this guy is doing. It's all about the soil. They call it regenerative agriculture. It's all about the soil. And you have all those microbes in there that are analogous to the microbes in our gut. So we're not absorbing our food directly. The microbes are processing it for us. And by the way, I have in my hands a recent scientific paper from China in which they speculate that what's happening with Chinese herbal formulas is that they are altering the gut flora in order to effect restoration or a remedy. And so real scientists now are very, very conscious of the microbial universe and how we're utterly dependent on it. So it's not only our own health, it's the health of the plants out there growing in the soil. They have to have a full microbial array that's healthy and balanced. And that's why we say it's all about the soil. Joseph Brinkman, the traditional medicinals tea guy who got really into fair trade, he's put out a paper fairly recently about gansao, Glycyrrhiza urulensis, Chinese licorice. So we knew back in 2002 at the conservation conference in New York City that the Chinese government had already restricted wild crafting in the north of China, wild harvesting, because the plant was endangered. And Brinkman points out that still only 20% of demand is filled on farm production. They're still wild harvesting most of the gansao. Meanwhile, they're outsourcing production to other Asian countries. So Chinese scientists come out with a paper recently saying mycorrhizal fungi help support the gansao in adapting to a new location.
Amazing.
Well, how about that? So real science is moving in our direction, and that is great satisfaction to me. And it is, as I say, you can't rely on the New York Times to report these things. You have to be able to seek it out online or in books and podcasts. My hope is that these wonderful people who are working out there will be recognized. There's no good reason to fear because there are so many good people. And I tell you this with all my heart. One of our best farmers, Sue Decker, she's on the board of High Falls Foundation. She grows 250 different vegetables every year. Her farm is in my county. I've seen her work with a crew. She's unbelievable. She is just the most amazing farmer. And I bring a crop to her. We analyze it together. We try some of it. She gets actively involved in the development. She makes creative suggestions, and she does a fabulous job. And then she donates all of the proceeds back to High Falls Foundation. So, I mean, Gretchen, people are there are so many really good people out there.
And committed people. You've been doing this now for over 30 years.
Yeah.
Robert, I know Robert, he has had his heart in with the herbs since he was a young man. And
Yes.
And everyone who you're mentioning, these are people who have been dedicated. But as you've mentioned through telling this story, there are major roadblocks, major hurdles within the system that are preventing all of the hard work and the dedication from moving forward to the next level. So what I wanted to do is thank you, first of all, for giving this history, because I don't think that many people, at least many people of my generation and the people younger than me, know this. And what I've noticed recently through social media platforms and groups and through discussions I've had with colleagues, and of course, due to the recent geopolitical climate and going back to COVID as well, people are now recognizing and acknowledging the limitations with relying upon only imported herbs. It's just it's not sustainable, and it's not a good long-term strategy for the security of our medicine. I don't think that anybody is suggesting that we should or could rely only on domestically grown herbs, but we need to start putting the infrastructure in place so that we can have some sort of a combination of both. I think that's what I'm hearing from you, and that sounds logical. Yes. And there need to be so many people becoming active to participate in this process, to legislate for this, to push for this, to provide the research and the support and the finances and all of the pieces to somehow start having this moving in that direction. And so that was my goal for the first part of this series. I think this will be at least a 2-part series, if not more, but was to have you provide this background first and foremost, so that people know what has been done up until now. I have a few questions and then one story to share myself.
Yes.
My first story to share for our listeners is I first met Jean when I was a student and I attended, I guess I would just call it an herb camp or a summer externship at High Falls Gardens. I was in Chicago and I had first started my Chinese medicine education. I had first started studying acupuncture and herbal medicine at Pacific in Chicago. And I somehow got wind. I don't remember how I got wind of this. Maybe you came and lectured or someone told me about it. I don't remember.
Those internships were part of the botanical studies program. So we advertised them in all the colleges. And they ran from 2006 until 2012. And a total of maybe 60 students were involved. And like you, that experience made an indelible impression.
Yes, I was really into herbs and herbal medicine. Those who have been my students know that I always say, well, acupuncture is great, but really herbs is where my heart is. But I went and I studied with you. It was just for a week, but I got to work in your garden and pull weeds and dig and help with a harvest. I don't know if I told you this, but I have a forever scar on the middle finger of my left hand when you gave me a very sharp knife. And I should have said something at the time, but I had a sharp knife and I was taking the cortex off of the philodendron, huangbai, for those of you who in the damp heat category, huangbai. I was scraping off the bark and I scraped right through to my finger. So I have a permanent reminder every time I use my left hand. We all got to stay together, this group of students, and just sit and listen to you and have you tell these stories and talk about the gardens and dig in the dirt and smell the soil and see the plants growing and help with some pau jure, some preparation of some of the herbs. And for anyone who's interested, I don't think you're currently running the programs at this point, but people who want to go down to Philmont, New York and see your garden and see what you do, it's really an amazing experience. And so I think that experience solidified, for me at least, how important the herbs were and really hit home the idea of the herbs, this herbal medicine. These are real plants. This is organic material that we have to honor and nurture and cultivate as we are then dispensing it to our patients. So, it was an amazing experience that you had these herb camps running for these number of years. So thank you.
Well, we're not running them anymore. They're very expensive at this point.
I can imagine.
Very expensive. Also, most of our farms, including mine, are not set up for agritourism. So that's a problem. That could be a course of development to really find a farmer who's willing to host an opportunity like that. It may be possible in different states, not only New York, but the experience was so important for all of you students that I think there has to be a way to get back to that.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be me and my farm specifically, but I'm alert to the opportunity, let's say, to set up something like that because it is so important.
And, that leads me to my next question, which I think is going to be the question that's going to stimulate our part 2 of this conversation. But for the near future, because this is, as you've mentioned, this is a long-term project to get national resources, to get awareness, to get community and network, and to have people working on this, because this will take time. And as I think about what has happened in Asia and how long China's runway has been to have the infrastructure to support this, I think what I would like to talk about next, but if we can just have you highlight a few key elements in the next, let's say 2 minutes, what needs to happen next? We need what? We need funding, we need research. What are the next immediate steps to get our country poised for some production, or what is it? Is it with the farmers? Is it with the manufacturers? Is it with small businesses who want to use these herbs, or is it with the individual practitioners? Where is?
Well, that's an excellent question. And right now, Janine Davis, as you saw on that roundtable that was held recently, by the way, if any listener wants to review that, you can email me or email me and I'll give you the site and the passcode for that. Janine and others feel that the herbal products industry has to be goaded to lend more support. You have the importers of Chinese herbs like Springwind, New Herbs, others. Their business model is based on cheap produce from China. Okay. And once you have a business model set up, you can't easily adapt that to much more expensive domestic production. I don't know if help will come from the product makers and the importers, but at least they have to be challenged. I would also like to see the clinicians, at least some of them, get more into challenge mode and push back against the really bad pharmaceutical propaganda and junk science that we've been subject to, especially in the last 5 years. So that whole thing is happening. And again, it's under the radar. The New York Times doesn't want to report on this, but more and more people are starting to really seriously question the pharmaceutical worldview. And, I feel a little competent to mount a challenge against that because we have so much experience now from the agriculture side with the microbiome and also from basic botany. If you understand basic botany, you know that plant populations differ in their biochemical constituents from one site to 5 miles, 10 miles away. This is the natural world. And big pharma and Western medicine has led us into the idea that there are magic bullets for everything. So if we fall back on our basic education in traditional Chinese medicine, we know that's not true. That medicine is really a branch of diet. It's about the plants and the fresh air and the clean water and the environment. It's not about some magic bullet. So we have to get away from magic bullet thinking. We have to be able to challenge that. We have to be able to challenge the government to support traditional medicine. And that takes advocacy of type that I don't pretend to have the complete answer to that, but I would support anyone who attempted it. Now I've studied the situation for 35 years. And I'm basically a plant person myself. My high school job in Fargo, North Dakota, was working for agronomy graduate students at NDSU. I was out in the field pollinating sunflowers when I was 15 years old. Okay, so
Wow.
I was recruited to Harvard Radcliffe. They had a farm program back then in the 60s. This was their attempt at diversification in the 60s. They ran a farm program and they recruited farm boys and girls. And, I wasn't actually living on a farm, but I was working on farms. When I left home and went to college, I never thought that I would be back in agriculture, but you can take the girl out of the farm, but you can't take the farm out of the girl. That's the way it goes. That's just life.
It was in there.
So I've been involved. I feel prepared to form the arguments. Whether I can actually deliver them or not, I don't know because I'm only one person. And I need Gretchen's help with the podcasts and other people who are doing similar things. We need to be more active in that regard.
You need a community and a network of people with a variety of skills and connections who are working in their own ways to bring this to the next level. And so I think some of the practical pieces of information regarding next steps and how people can help and areas of infrastructure that need to be built, I think these will be things that we can discuss in part 2. What I would say to people listening for right now is if you are interested or if you have something to share, then go and email Jean or follow her Instagram, sign up with her website, sign up with Zai-Sheng Herbs. Now, you have a few different websites. Let me put these. You have highfallsgardens.net, which is your medicinal herb gardens website.
Right. And was my sole proprietorship garden until 2008 when we formed the foundation. And now it's really the foundation's website. And I'm acting as one of the agents for that. But posted on that website is our old newsletter, which went through the 90s and the aughts into the teens until 2019. So if you're interested in more history about agriculture and about our struggles to do domestic production, there's a lot of information in those newsletters. you can read up on the history.
Great. So there's that website, and then there's also the zaishengherbs.com, which is ZAISHENG herbs.com. And that is your herb company, where anyone who is a practitioner can actually set up an account and even purchase the raw herbs and see what you're growing and learn more information about that herb company.
Right. It's run as a program of the foundation, but it's on an e-commerce platform, and we are packaging in small lots, 8 ounces and 4 ounces, because we're not giving out samples. So we want to minimize the risk to the practitioners. If they're curious, they can afford a 4 ounce or an 8 ounce purchase. We're maintaining that with a lot of volunteer labor and a lot of goodwill, but it is for the moment sustainable. Now, to develop our volume, of course, you practitioners are interested in volume. You're accustomed to buying in 1 pound lots. And to develop volume, we're going to have to somehow get funding, because that's kind of going up to the next level in terms of agriculture.
And it seems to me like volume would need to be reliable, dependable,
Yes.
sustainable volume needs
Right.
to be what needs to happen at the next level in order to have
Yes.
any sort of domestic production that would be really usable for manufacturers.
That's
Right.
true. The secret to that is to set up multiple sites of production. So you don't have one farmer with 14 acres of, Huang Chi. You have 14 farmers with half an acre or 1 acre. And so we keep it at the small farm ecological level rather than giving it over to agribusiness. That's the development course we prefer, but it can be done. We're already doing it, and it would really, really help to get specialty crop development funding, because then we could determine those sites very accurately. So we already know, because New York has several different climate zones and altitudes and terrains. We know that if we grow out one crop in 6 different places, we get 6 different results. So which of those is preferable to the clinician? That's a development process that you go through for most of the highly desirable tonic herbs, at least. So, okay, so I'm getting ahead of myself. This is probably better that we have a part 2.
I am all ready. I know I'm ready to start asking you more questions. These questions, these conversations and more will be addressed in part 2, which I'm already going to start planning for. For our listeners, stay tuned. Probably by the time we air these, maybe we'll even air one right after the other. But there will be a part 2 that will go more into conversations about these questions and interesting thoughts and considerations when talking about domestic herb production. But at this point, I am glad that in this first part 1, we did cover so much about the history and raise some of the questions and concerns which people need to start thinking about right now.
Yes.
And so everyone has the information they need to follow up. Please follow Jean's Instagram, Zaisheng Herbs and High Falls Gardens. Go to her websites, reach out to her if you have any desire to participate or anything to share. And Jean, I just wanted to ask just sort of one more question for you, because you grow these plants, you grow these herbs. Do you have do you have a favorite herb, or do you have a particular herb that you love taking the tea, or one that is your favorite to harvest? For those of us who haven't ever worked with these herbs, growing them from the ground, can you just share 1 or 2 herbs that you particularly just love in some way after working with them?
Bai Shao and Mudan Pi. So I grew up until I was 5 years old right next to my grandmother in St. Cloud, Minnesota, and she had peonies growing in her garden. And I've loved peonies since I was a small child. So they're absolutely wonderful plants to work with. The aroma of the roots, it's like the greatest perfume. Wow. And of course, their beauty is just beyond belief. So, yeah. That's the peonies.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'm just imagining now, I know what the roots smell like, but I'm just imagining this fragrance. And, what an amazing experience that you have dedicated your life to working with these plants in their medicine and in all of their magic and all of their power. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here with us today. And thank you for sharing this history that you have such an intimate and personal connection with. And to our listeners, stay tuned for part 2. That's all for today's episode of Elevated Practice. I'd like to express my gratitude to our guests today and always for sharing their wisdom with all our listeners. I hope you were able to take away some insights, practical knowledge, or inspirational ideas that you can apply right away to elevate your own practice. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe and tell your friends and colleagues about Elevated Practice. If you have an idea for an episode or a recommendation for a guest, please respond in the comments or message me, Gretchen Badami, directly through social media. Thank you, and I can't wait for you to hear our next episode.